Hey folks, this is Mr. O'Keefe, and this is the first video of our unit called the Age of Discovery. Now this is a term really seen from a European lens or European perspective. Discovery sounds like a nice, exciting thing, and it was for the Europeans, but it wasn't for most of the people involved in this unit. In fact, for most people, if we look at it from a different lens, it was the age of apocalypse because the native cultures of the United States, as they knew themselves, were pretty much going to end. Think of it as the aliens came and wiped out planet Earth and they took over. They would say, hey, it's a great time of expansion and our people have more space and we have more resources. This is great. But it wouldn't be great for people, would it? And that's kind of the same type of thing here. So when we say the age of discovery, we got to remember that's from the European perspective, which is usually the perspective that we take on in our culture. So we usually start class with a warm-up question, and this is ours for today. It's basically asking, do the ends justify the means? We know today we live in a pretty good country. It's not perfect, but I think most people enjoy living here who live here. Large country, we have the most money of any country. But how we got there, there's some controversy, right? And today we'll just talk about the Native Americans or American Indians specifically. Hopefully about the Trail of Tears and all kinds of other atrocities that happened between the U.S. and Native Americans. Could you argue that, well, that's terrible, but, we needed to do that, or that was justified in some way because look where we are today? Or is there a different way that things could have been done? So do the ends justify the means? And we can really think about that with everyday life. There's some things you can do. You could cheat. Well, if I cheat in a test and I get 100 or I get an A, that works out for me, right? So it's not the right thing to do. It's not the moral thing to do, but it worked out. So what? That's something that we'll kind of touch on throughout this unit because that's an important thing to address in our everyday lives. Tegan, are you ready to go to bed soon?
No.
No, why not? No, you gotta. Mommy and Daddy want to relax for a second. So you want to go to bed? You lay down in your bed and go to sleep?
No.
Yeah, that's how she always is every day. Well, I could scream at her or hit her, and that stuff might actually work. She would probably go to sleep or be too afraid to be loud, and then we could just relax for a little bit, which would be wonderful. But that's in my self-interest, right? But is that the best thing to do? Look at the big picture. Little picture, yeah, cool. She goes to sleep when I want her to go to sleep, and she doesn't bother me, and that's good for me. But what's that going to happen? What's going to happen to her in the big picture? With a lot of abuse, verbal, physical abuse. How's that going to affect her psyche? How's that going to affect her life going forward? Is she going to be that way with her children? That's something that we often don't consider is the big picture. And that's what we're going to try to look at here. And that's why studying history is pretty important. All right, so we're going to start off with a gory video. Feel free to click the link that pops up and watch as much or as little of this video as you feel comfortable with. I'll have some questions for you. Answers like, oh, they were crazy or something like that. Well, that's one way to look at it. Remember, think about the lens example I gave in the beginning of this video. That made sense to them. There's probably lots of things that we do today that they would think is weird, like TikTok videos, because they are weird. But maybe it makes sense to you. That's my lens of an old person. And for many old people, it's a literal lens. But for the Mayans, when Europeans came, they thought, that is pretty crazy. And you kind of seem like barbarians to us. But again, that was from their lens. To the Mayans, this was to improve their life. This was to make everything better. If they didn't, things would get worse. So why wouldn't they just do this? They believed in gods devoutly, just like people believe in their religion today. So if someone's very religious today and they go to church, no one thinks that's strange. And to the Mayans, this was part of following their faith. I wouldn't advocate for it today, but just to kind of think about seeing things from different perspectives, right? That was kind of how they rolled. That was how they operated. But you can kind of see why Europeans would look down upon them for that. Think about other Native Americans. When I say Native Americans or American Indians, that's probably not what you pictured, right? You probably picture the dudes with the feathers on their heads like you see in cartoons and sports mascots and you learned in middle school and things like that. But technically, they're still Native Americans, right? They're still American Indians. They had lived here. They're pre-Columbian peoples is what we refer to them as because they were here before Columbus. But again, that's a European perspective, right? So what happened to most Native American tribes? Well, we know they were either destroyed, completely wiped out, or mostly wiped out. Of course, there's still people today who belong to different Native American tribes. But for the most part, I mean, it was, an apocalypse for those people. Next question, what is self-interest? It's what's best for you. And I think that a lot of times we should kind of focus on what's best for us. But there's a line that is crossed, that could be crossed at least, when our self-interest is actually hurting someone else's self-interest. Example, hey, you have a test coming up, study for it. You're going to kind of maybe ignore some of your friends or ignore your video game friends, ignore your pretend friends that are your friends on the internet or whatever. Maybe they're your real friends. I don't know your life. But you have to kind of give something up for that, but that's your self-interest. Is it hurting their self-interest? Maybe a little bit, but it's not really putting them in danger. You're not hurting them, right? Not really. So that's kind of the struggle there, is to put yourself in front of other things that you want, but not when it's going to hurt other people. All right, like the Europeans, their self-interest we'll see is they want money. Okay, that's fine. If you want to make money someday, great. But that's going to come at the expense of African people who are enslaved, Native American people who are enslaved and killed. So was it okay for them? That's something we got to talk about. All right, so how did human beings get to the Americas in the first place? Well, they actually walked here, believe it or not. And we know that the first human beings, or Homo sapiens, originated from Africa. And we migrated out of Africa following animal migrations. People were nomadic for most of our history. So following animal migrations, these human beings are going to cross a land bridge called Beringia. Today, if you want to visit it, you're going to need scuba gear because it is under the water. And I'll show you what I mean by that. They didn't walk on water, but not a bunch of like Jesuses came across. The water levels were lower and people walked across. So take a look at this GIF, mainly in the circle area there. That is where human beings crossed over. We see that the ice is receding as this GIF goes along. That's what's happening at the end of the first ice age, the last ice age. The glaciers recede and the water levels rise. Why? Well, because because of all the ice, the water levels were lower. Just kind of like the opposite today, ice is melting, water levels are rising. Ice age, water levels were lower because of all the ice that existed. So land that is not too far under the water today was visible on the surface. People could walk across it, and that's exactly what they did. So we can kind of see down here, the bottom part, you can see around 10,000 BC, people could walk across. It was pretty cold, but there was land there. And then as we go on along here, people are going to migrate south. Here's another map. It's not a GIF. It's just a still map for you. And a recreation I made for you. You're welcome. This took a long time. We get the Native Americans following the animal migrations. Were they buffalo? I have no idea. I'm not a biology teacher, but they're following them down through that. I know that's pretty breathtaking. You can go ahead and watch it again if you want, or you can just forget that happened. So as human beings get to the Americas, they continue to migrate south. Why? Because it's warmer. So warmer temperatures, more variation of crops, different types of animals, and it's just warmer, so that's better. It's way more fun to go to the beach when it's not freezing cold, things like that. So we get to the Great Lakes, Gulf of Mexico, Florida, the before crazy people live there, and just alligators and snakes live there. So these people, as you can see from the picture, are what we think of when we get to Native Americans, people that settled in these areas. And this is happening, by the way, over like thousands of years and generations as people migrate, because they don't really know where they are. They really don't care. These people at this time are just following animal migrations. They're nomads. They care about, we have food? Do we have water? Are we safe? Now, a lot of people call them Indians. Maybe you know the answer to that, and it's due to Christopher Columbus, right? He landed in the Caribbean in 1492, in the Bahamas, probably, and he said, oh, I'm in the East Indies, so I'm going to call these people Indians. And he wasn't. He was in what would eventually be known as the West Indies. So he kind of was right to call it the West Indies, so they were kind of Indians. They were Western Indians. But we still call them today, maybe out of ignorance. I'm not sure. However, the American Indian community does prefer the term American Indian versus Native American. So as time goes on, these people move from the Great Lakes region and what is today the U.S. further south to Mesoamerica. Why? Again, following animal migrations. So Mesoamerica might be a new term to you. That just is basically meaning Middle America. Meso, kind of like Mesopotamia, middle, or between the rivers, so between the American land masses. I'll show you a map of that in a second. And the two main Mesoamerican civilizations here are the Maya and the Aztec. Way to remember that, think Meso, M for Maya, A for Aztec, America. And as we'll learn about, and I already kind of mentioned, most of these early people were polytheistic. Remember, poly means many, like a polygon. You can't draw a one-sided polygon, probably. Again, I'm not a math teacher, but many. And then theistic, gods, like theocracy. This prefix, theo, means religion. Theocracy is ruled by religion. Theistic, we're talking about many gods. Just like the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Mesopotamians, so on and so forth. All right, so we got North America and South America here. And this area is Mesoamerica. Technically, it's part of North America, but that's what we're talking, Mesoamerica. If I show you an overlay here, we said the Aztec and the Maya were Mesoamerican, and then we'll talk about the Inca, which was in South America. One thing that we need to understand when we study the civilization is they were on their own. Right? Think about if you're given an assignment by your teacher and they say, hey, you can work with other people. Great. But what if you're by yourself and either no one likes you or you smell bad or you're separated physically from everyone else in the room? You're on your own, right? And that's kind of how Mesoamerica was. They were over here by themselves. Where Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and Asia, they could work together, right? We know that the Silk Road existed. We know that there was trade in the Mediterranean Sea. India could trade with China and with Africa and with the Middle East. So all these people got to kind of work together on this civilization project where the Americans really didn't. They were by themselves. Basically, group work versus individual work, what's going to look better? I would hope that group work would work better. But we'll still see there's a lot of similarities between these two civilizations, even though there's no evidence that they ever were able to communicate with one another. we'll start with the Maya. That's the video we watched in the beginning was based off what we know about the Mayan civilization. All right, seems like they were pretty brutal. Hopefully that's not everything that you think about them. There's more to them than that. They had a very accurate calendar. It could predict all kinds of things as far as what you would see in the night sky. And maybe you remember back to 2012, and that was 8 years ago, when people thought, oh, the world's going to end. I don't know if anyone seriously thought this. Probably some people. I remember having to calm down some students who thought that world was going to end. I think they were serious. And it didn't. Spoiler alert. But the reason why is because their calendars predicted up until the year 2012. They said the world was going to end, but that's just when they stopped predicting it because their civilization collapsed, and they had better things to kind of worry about than predicting the future as far as what the night sky would look like and the equinoxes and that kind of stuff. But still pretty impressive. I don't know how to do that, and I live in 2020, and I have no excuse. They also use hieroglyphics, so picture writing. We use hieroglyphics every day. They're called emojis. It's maybe easier to just type a smiley face than to write out, I'm really happy right now. But imagine if you had to use emojis for this entire note set. It would be kind of tough. You need lots of emojis. You wouldn't understand all of them, and it would kind of be a disaster. So that's kind of the problem with hieroglyphics, is that they're good because you can communicate and keep records, but they're not good in the sense that it would be really hard to interpret all those. You'd have specific people in your civilization who'd be scribes, and they would know all of them, but most people wouldn't be able to read or write, so you'd have limited knowledge in your civilization. Now, maybe you're thinking, that's weird. Don't the Egyptians use hieroglyphics? They did. Also, the Egyptians had pyramids. Just like the Mayans. It looks a little bit different, but Egyptians built pyramids kind of like this. You can see how they have steps, but they just basically filled in the steps with bricks, and boom, you got your pyramids. Very similar. We know from the video, they perform human sacrifice, which wasn't really only done in the Americas. There's other evidence of human sacrifice all over the world. There's evidence in the Bible of human sacrifice, so we know that it's happened before, but these civilizations are kind of known for that, fair or unfair. So a lot of things are very similar, maybe you notice, between the Mayans and Asian countries, like we learned about in the first unit, like Mesopotamia and Egypt. Okay, hieroglyphics, polytheism, calendars. The reason we have 12 months in our calendar, by the way, is because of the Mesopotamians. Actually, the Babylonians were the first ones to come up with the 12-month calendar, and we still use that today. Babylonians, just like, who had Hammurabi's code, who decided if you were guilty or innocent by throwing you into the river and seeing if you could swim. They also developed the calendar, so not always lost. This picture down here is a picture of a ziggurat, or a Mesopotamian temple, and hopefully you can kind of see there's a lot of similarities. You got your stairways, you got the large base, and the narrower kind of as it goes up, kind of like a pyramid would be. Politically, kings. One person would rule. You have this monarchy, kind of monarchical, I guess, system where one person rules. So how are those similar? Like, they never encountered one another. So how do you explain that? Pretty obvious. Aliens. So it wasn't really aliens. It was the brain. All humans had the same brain. We all came from really the same roots, the same biological roots, I guess I should say. We think through problems similarly. Our brain was all developed when we were nomadic. We still have nomadic tendencies. That's why we get freaked out pretty easily, because our ancestors kind of had to have kept them safe, just as an example. Some people are put in different conditions. They have varying levels of diversity and experience. So our brains aren't all, biologically they're the same. Our experience, our culture, things like that change the way we look at situations. But as far as the Aztec and the Maya and the Inca went, we can see some very similarities between them and European and Asian cultures because they're all human. They had the same brain. They had the same way of thinking. That's why we have all those similarities that we just went over. Onto the Aztec. Built roads like the Romans and temples like everybody, I guess. Their territory was over modern-day Mexico. Now, you can still visit Mayan ruins, but as far as the capital city, Tenochtitlan or Tenochtitlan, you won't be able to find that, really. You can go to Mexico City, which is the capital of Mexico, and that's where Tenochtitlan was, yeah. And the base of the Spanish just built over top of that city into the modern city that exists there today. Just like the Maya, the Aztec had a monarchy. They had a king with very painful looking piercings, apparently. And very similar to how things were in everywhere else, lower rulers had to pay a tribute. And this is going to lead to some animosity between Aztec and other smaller cultures that existed in Mexico. They had ruled over them, and they didn't like that very much. And we'll see how that's going to come into play to the Aztec destruction later on. It's kind of like we talked about in the warm-up. The Aztecs said, hey, we can rule over these people and abuse them and push them around, and that's good for us now. But like lots of things do, it's going to come back to bite them in the end. All right, more human sacrifice pictures. This is a picture of a modern day, well, it still exists today, I guess I should say, Aztec graveyard, I guess, human sacrifice graveyard. This was actually the base of the temple to their god of war. And those are all real people's skulls that were pretty much sacrificed to the god of war. And then to the right, you can see a European depiction of human sacrifice. And yep, there's the heart the priest is holding. It's kind of seen as the essence of the person, so that's why they would cut your heart out, and that was kind of where your soul was located, and the priest would burn it real quick and then drink the blood from it to kind of bring in your spirit, and the priest, of course, would be connected to the god, and that's how the sacrifice would happen. So the Maya performed human sacrifice to appease their gods, to make them happy, where the Aztec did to postpone the end of the world. It's kind of hard to prove that the world wouldn't end unless you did it, unless you want to try, which was a big risk. So the Aztec figured, we'll just keep doing it. One person dies and then everyone else doesn't die. That's a pretty good deal, which would be hard to argue with at the time. Next, we're going to talk about the Inca civilization, and we're going to start with this video about Machu Picchu, on top of a mountain. Well, let's think about it. The strongest animal in South America, at least the animal that could lift the most weights, was the human being. That's right. There were llamas, but llamas aren't very strong compared to people, and that's pretty much it. So all that was done with basically human strength. So that's a problem. We talked about how they built terraces for farming. Getting all that material up there, keeping it up there would be pretty tough. Harnessing water, I mean, it rains, sure, but not nonstop. That would be a big problem. So all that was, on top of a mountain, water is going to go down it, right? That's how gravity works. So they had to find a way to preserve that water to keep it so they could use it. So why do you think they built that? It seems like a pain. Most civilizations didn't do that. Why do you think they did it? One reason is maybe you thought of it close to the gods. It's high up. The gods are up in the sky, right? Probably you think, most people think that because we can't go in the sky, so we can't see. So they're not here on the ground. They're probably up in the sky. So that's true. Also, strategically, it'd be really tough to attack a city on top of a mountain, and it would be really easy to defend it. So there's that too. And then I think another reason is just the physical, we're above you. We look down upon you. So that's where the elite would live in the Incan Empire. Hopefully, remember from the map, it was a pretty large empire. It wasn't just this city. This is just one of its capital cities where, again, high-ranking political people would live there, and they could literally look down on their rivals. So that's another part of it. Now, we talked about the terraces. That's how they were able to farm. Of course, they need food to support a city. And you can still go there today. I have a friend who went. It's quite a literal hike. It takes a couple of days to get there. Bugs and spiders and snakes and all that, but it would be a really cool hike. I'll never go because my wife wouldn't last 3 seconds. So I'm just going to imagine it here with you. So the Incans, remember they're South America. Incans are not Mesoamerica. They're going to control a lot of the west coast of South America. They were really, really good engineers. Again, roads, tunnels, aqueducts. We know that Greeks and the Romans were the first that we know of to create aqueducts, but the Incans did it on their own. Bridges. And you saw from the video all of the different stonework that was done by the Incas. Didn't have mortar. So today, I mean, even the school that we go to, brick and mortar. The mortar is kind of like glue. They didn't have that. They basically cut stones to fit into the other stones. It's like this 3D puzzle, and they have built a whole city like that. And that's another picture of the terrace. So let's review, and then we'll end this video. First question, how did humans get to America? I know they originated in Africa, so how did they get to America? The answer is they crossed a land bridge. Beringia is formed by low sea levels, the first ice age. A lot of ice, that means there were lower water levels in the oceans. Next question, what is Mesoamerica? Remember I said the prefix meso means between, so it's an area between the Americas or Central America. Two main tribes or two main civilizations who lived in Mesoamerica. Remember I said Mesoamerica. M and A, what's that? Maya and the Aztec. Which two civilizations practiced human sacrifice? Well, the two that we just talked about, they were close. So it was very likely that they influenced one another. One achievement of the Aztec? Roads, a tribute system for lesser kings or kind of like lords, if you want to compare it to European feudalism. They also had an accurate calendar. We talked about the Mayans having it. I don't know if I mentioned the Aztec, but they did also, again, because they were close geographically. That makes sense. And the Inca, we talked about their engineering skills. So hopefully you get an idea of what the Americas were like before Columbus arrived. And we know that that is going to change everything in the Americas. So if you want to, you can take a break, go back to your video games or go back to sleeping. What time is it? It's 1:08, so you're probably ready to go back to bed. It's been a long day for you so far. Or you can go ahead and click on the link and go ahead to the part 2 of this video.